folks out from the Tampa Pro. Welcome back, everybody, to my prep series. And this week's going well. I actually didn't make any changes on the plan off the last video that you saw because I'd pulled food down a little bit last time and upped the cardio intensity too. And that played good dividends. So ended up coming from around that 248 mark to about 245 this week. So 3-ish pounds, kind of rounding this stuff, but that leads me around it's just like almost 1.4% body weight loss, which is still a little bit more of an aggressive fat loss rate. Visually though, it's been really positive changes, more waist change. I could see like just a little bit more glute line in like my side shots. Waist overall is just a lot tighter, easier to control on quarter turns. Even just flexing quads, like you get leaner, just you're able to see more and position yourself better. The off season, you're flexing, it's like nothing's moving, it's just covered in fat. So yeah, overall visually very, very positive moves for this week without having to make much adjustment. But looking over the plan for this week, and just to give you the recap, if you didn't catch last week's, that diet change leaves me around 3,200 calories on my training days, 300 grams of protein, 350 grams of carbs, and 65 grams of fat. On the non-train days, it's primarily a carbohydrate drop to 238 grams of carbs, and from that carb drop, some of those trace proteins drop down. That's why protein comes down to about 280 grams. And fats are pretty close to the same, right? It ends up being like 67 grams of fat. Someone asked like, John, why don't you replace the protein? And I'm still in a range that falls within this kind of 1.2, 1.3 grams per pound of body weight, which is more than enough to retain tissue on prep. And the best indication if you are in like holding tissue well on prep is gym performance, like what's happening in the gym. So if training performance is dropping down across all movements, it's pretty indicative that you're probably not retaining great tissue during that time. Fatigue's getting higher as well. That could mask some of that. You know, with that being said, this past week, I've seen some of the best training I've had since I've started prep. I think a lot of the earlier on PED escalations that I made are starting to compound. Those esters are building up and getting more to peak stable serum levels. So seeing that come about more through like improvements in training performance. And even with like the weight drop, like I don't feel that depleted kind of small feeling that you do off the front end of prep. Like it's starting to feel just still round and full, but getting harder. So it's like, it's a fun spot to be in. It's like you kind of get over that initial hump of prep where you still just feel small and fat. Anyway, hunger wise going well, so no issues tolerating the current diet. Cardio is also excellent. Usually if I stay on the treadmill only, that starts beating up my ankles. Go to the Stairmaster, can start having like hip stuff going on. So splitting it between the spin bike for 15 minutes and the treadmill for 10 has been perfect. And training legs, which is what we're gonna get into today and walk you through, has also been excellent, and no detriment for doing the bike either. And what I'll do is on leg day, this day, is I don't do any cardio. So I just do steps. So I keep my steps around 10,000 per day. So I just leave out the cardio and just do just outdoor walking. If it's rainy, indoor walking on the treadmill, but flat. So just make sure keep the output up. And the day after legs, I also do cardio. So that's actually my complete rest day from direct cardio work and training. So what am I doing this week change-wise to the plan? Because everything's clicking along pretty well. And, you know, Renee was asking me like, and everyone's asking me like, what are you going to do? Like if you're, you know, people were like almost upset that, John, if you put on all this muscle and you're like in the low 220s, why would you just diet all off going to 212? And I think what you have to realize too is that you don't just diet it all off just because you suck down to 212. Like you would deplete some in glycogen, but then you could make some manipulations to drop quick into the weight class. So you're not necessarily going to be sacrificing muscle directly. The issue more is that you won't be able to fill out as much as you would if you had not sucked down. So there is a sacrifice still to make, but you have to still weigh out like how close are you? If you're like 218, like gosh, that's not that far away from 212, and you have to kind of weigh out like what's going to be the best version of you on stage, and how would that, if it's the open, if that's more competitive, or is the most competitive version the 212 version, at least for this year. So, and I also consider too that, you know, I'm going to be 37, not terribly old, but also I'm not 27. So it makes my decisions a little different of the importance of doing the Olympia or not having another 10 years of building up further into the open. So, but anyway, changes for the week. It's going well with gym performance and everything. Have continued to make these escalations week to week in anabolics, and just based off of like what I was doing in the off season, my past preps, I do have like total androgen load now at 1400 milligram per week. Nothing else really changed. One thing I did put in was 20 micrograms of clenbuterol, just to keep pushing the fat loss and be more aggressive out the early gates still with prep. And, you know, you have to realize, like, I wouldn't advise someone of putting a lot in earlier on in prep. You have to just weigh out like where you are competitive wise and also risk wise. Like, realize for like myself, like health is great for lab work, my echocardiogram, calcium score, everything. So, and also consideration that I'm not going to be doing this for the next 10 years. Like, I'm on the tail end of competing. So I can accept more risk, especially for the level I compete at. But someone else that, hey, maybe you know you don't have that career ahead of you in bodybuilding, like that risk acceptance is going to be a little bit different. Anyway, those are the only changes. I'm going to hold everything else the same because that's all working well. Now, let's get to this leg day. So, leg day for me, I only train legs once a week. That's been consistent for a while. I get in trouble when I'm training legs more frequently, with just past injury stuff can crop up with the frequency, beating up connective tissue, and also legs are a strong body part for me. So realize that this session is catered around that I have legs is a strong body part. So if you need to bring up your legs, there's going to be tips in this that you absolutely could apply, but training legs once a week at the volume that I'm at might not be applicable to what you need. So with that being said, my leg day. Starting out, I've done a lying leg curl for quite a long time. For one, most people don't have overpowering hamstrings. Usually for guys you see, like, they have big glutes, maybe they have big quads. Hamstrings usually are always a lagging thing. You never say like, oh, that guy's hamstrings are just way too big. So, and also hamstrings, they don't require, the stimulus level that you have to give them is not overall very systemically fatiguing. So it doesn't really cause any other detriment to the workout. Potentially you might say, oh, it kind of can warm up the knees a little bit. So that's why they're always first. And I do a lying leg curl first because the muscle can be a little bit harder to get short, so fully contracted in that shortened phase. Once you get tired, it's harder to get into the shortened phase of a muscle. So that's why this one's going first. I like the prime because it does have the variable loading on it. Now, I do preferentially load onto that top peg, so it is a little harder off the stop. Now, that's not the full lengthen range of the hamstring. So yes, I'm starting more loading off the beginning, but again, a fully stretched hamstring is going to be more like in a seated leg curl or a stiff leg. So this is still like loading a little bit more preferentially like mid-range for the actual contractile range of the hamstring. Then it kind of deloads a little bit as you get to the shortened. So that is that setup. Don't overthink these like prime machines too much. I mean, it can get really complicated, and if you're trained to a point that's pretty close proximity to failure, it might be a wash. Like, it might not make a huge difference until you're in like a more advanced level where you don't have as many sets to work with, and also those final reps matter a lot more for stimulus. Now, with the lying hamstring curl, just doing 3 sets here. I stay in the 10 to 15 rep range, and that completes that one. The next thing I do is a single leg extension. I have not usually done it like this. Usually I go to a compound squat like hack squat or pendulum squat. However, I am trying to not get injured on prep for the life of me. And it's gone well. And I did have a little tweak in my quad. This was a couple months ago now. So trying to program to be just very effective in training and not use a lot of loads. So I am doing this leg extension first, and I use the new fit machine, which it is a an EMG machine. So it sends a DC current that basically causes a muscle contraction. You get a full recruitment of all motor units. So that makes the reps very, very effective. Also think about it's making a muscle contract, and then you're having to pull through the eccentric phase. So it also can create quite a bit of muscle damage as well. But with this, the muscle fatigues relatively quickly and you don't need a lot of load. So that's been one aspect around why I'm using it. Also, I have some discrepancies in my left and my right quad, to where my left quad, it does not fire as efficiently, and also the strength is a little different. So I'm helping to use this to even this out, and also potentially help my posing, because my left leg's a little harder to control. So I preferentially put these pads towards my vastus lateralis and also my rectus femoris, where I kind of have those issues. Now, I like single leg either way because it allows me to take that kneecap and line it straight up to the sky. Because a lot of times if you have big legs, your feet will kind of rotate out as you kick up, and you end up kind of loading the knee medially. If you ever experience that type of knee pain there, single leg might be the good thing for you to do. I also scoot that seat pretty far back, so I'm a little bit more hip extended. So my hips aren't flexed and bent over as much, and that actually gets that rectus femoris in a little bit more the lengthened state. Because remember, that one part of the quad, the rec fem, it does cross the knee joint, but also the hip joint. So to fully lengthen it, you need to be in that position. And I don't do a lot of split leg squats because I've had issues with those. So I do 3 sets here. Quads get pretty pumped, and they are pretty fatigued as well from this. Now I can go on to do my compound movements. And what we just got in the gym, which is very exciting, is the Rogers hip press. And it is a bit more hip dominant. So like, kind of can bring a little bit more glutes in. Of course, it's going to bring quads in. It does deload quite a bit once you get to the bottom position, and then it is just non-stop relentless as you're pressing into it. It just gets harder and harder as you go up, and you have better mechanics to straighten the knee, but at the same time, that load is matching the profile of the actual muscle ability to contract. So it is just like constant grinders. You can keep grinding these reps out. You think you're like, oh, this got to be like a 1 RIR, and you're like, nope, you can still keep going. So it's been a fun one to have. It's very braced, and also I like it because it does deload some in the bottom. So it's like my next transition into safely getting into like more quad training after the leg extension. With the Rogers hip press, I'll do 2 sets here. So I'll do about a set of 8 to 9, then I'll back off and load a little bit and hit something a little bit higher rep, but I try to stay within this 8 to 12 rep range. I like doing the heavy set first because it's fun, and then having the lighter set afterwards. If you do have issues around ankle mobility, because your ability to get your feet really low on that platform is going to keep your knee really far away from the line of force, which means it challenges your quad a lot if that's what you're looking for. So if you are really not that great with ankle mobility, you could potentially do a little bit of calf work, like straight leg, just calf raises off the beginning of the session. That eccentric loading can help you gain some of that access. There's a lot of other things to do that kind of goes beyond the scope of what I'm trying to tell you here. But anyway, after the hip press, I go back to a hamstring movement, and kind of depends on who's on what equipment when I do this. But after the Rogers, I'll go to a seated leg curl. Now the seated leg curl, it's much more brace pattern. So after we've already done a few exercises and a little bit more fatigued, we can get in something that's going to be, you don't have to think about as much, but also doesn't require as much control of the hip. So we're in a very braced pattern with the thigh support down and also pushing ourselves away and contracting down on the abs to hold that hip position really well. And with the seated leg curl, the hamstring is fully stretched in this position. So we have a lying leg curl and a seated leg curl that will train the entire contractile range of the hamstring. Now, some people say don't do them on the same day. Completely understand that thought process. If you're someone that needs to bring up legs and you're going to train them twice a week, I absolutely would do those in separate days. Have one day lying, one day seated, or maybe you have a stiff leg deadlift or a Romanian deadlift another day. And that's what I have. Like I have a stiff leg deadlift on my back day. So that's how I program around these. So seated leg curl, I do 2 sets and that wraps up hamstrings. Now, the last thing I'm going to do is hack squat. So finally, I'm going to get into that deep, lengthened, loaded position. There's no band, there's no let off on the bottom. It's going to fully load the quad in that stretch state, which is great for quad stimulus, but also if you had like injuries in your past, this could be a little bit precarious. So one thing I do is dead stop the hack. So I'll come down on the pins, let it take a rest, then I will press up and actually do this on the Rogers as well. It also standardizes my reps and try not to bounce. That's what you don't want. So actually let it come to a rest and press up. And on this one, you want to get as much knee flexion as possible. So turn your feet out as much as you need to. That doesn't mean you need to go wide stance. It just means turn your feet out. So let your knees go out so it can clear and clear your abdomen for one, but also give you a little bit more hip range doing it. So you almost think of it, you're doing it like at this frog stance and keeping those feet as low on the platform as you can. This still might be like have good application for a squat shoe. If your ankle still sucks, go as low on the platform as you can before your heel comes up. So if this was your foot and your big toe, you'd want this like triangle planted on the ground. So you'd have like your big toe, like good pressure with the big toe, some pinky toe pressure and some good heel pressure, but a lot going on that big toe. So if we're going up onto the toe, it makes a lot less stable position for the ankle, but also it creates quite a bit of shear force at the knee. So we want, for output wise, over the long term, stable foot position. So I just did 1 set here. I had been doing 2, but after my first set, I was fried. My quads were so fried, and I just knew that I didn't need any more for the day. So that actually wrapped up my leg day. I ended up doing 6 sets for quads and 5 sets for hamstrings. And keep in mind, I have another 2 sets of hamstrings on my back day. So there is preferentially just a little bit more hamstring work present. Again, it's a very low volume, but the sets are, for me, like my quads being a strong point, I get so much out of all these sets. So that is plenty of volume for me, and it's a volume that I can grow off of too, actually. Now, if I really wanted to bring legs up, yeah, I would probably need more like maybe that 9 sets, getting towards 11 sets over time, building that up. So some consideration point for if you're trying to bring up legs. But I'm going to wrap it up there, guys. If y'all have any questions, leave them down below, and we will talk to you next time. And also, before I forget, if you have more questions and you want to see like really in detail, like my workouts, my PED program or diet and all that, I am posting it fully at the J3U forum. You can just sign up just for the forum and ask me anything you want, and I'll leave that link down below. Until next time, talk to you later.